Welcome, everybody. My name is Peter Wadners. I'm the president and CEO of Anderson Ranch. Super excited to have you here. On behalf of our board of trustees, our staff, the National Council who help make all the things that happen at the ranch happen, I just really want to welcome you here. It's super fantastic to have you here. We have some special underwriters of the series. Mel and Adam Lewis underwrote the series this year in honor of Toby. I know she's a friend of so many people in the room. She passed away this past spring, was the creator of the Progressive and curator of the Progressive Collection, a big friend to emerging artists, a big friend of the ranch, one of our former trustees, and we all miss her very much. Ulite Arts from Miami, Florida, another arts organization, has been a big supporter of this series. We have a partnership with them that brings 15 emerging artists from Miami up for a 5-week residence in the spring. It's just been a super dynamic program, so we really want to thank our friends at Ulite for that support as well. Rhoda Citron, Jeff Citron, Eleanor, and Domenico Di Soleil, Sherry and Joe Felson, Reggie and Lee Smith also all make gifts to help underwrite the series and make it happen through the year. So thank you to them as well. We are here today to hear Liz Larner. I'm going to introduce Douglas Fogel, a colleague. We're excited to have him as the curator in residence at the ranch. He's really been bringing some great voices and energy to the ranch. So Douglas, I'll pass over to you to lead our conversation. We will end with Q&A. We are recording today's session, so please wait for a microphone to come. Stand up so the microphone picks you up well. Say your name before you ask your question. That'll really help the audience that are online and in the cafe be able to keep track of the conversation. So Douglas, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, drinking a little water. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today. We are incredibly honored to have Liz Larner here from Los Angeles with us today at the ranch. I'll give you a brief introduction. Many of you know her work, some of you don't, and so hopefully it'll be a nice introduction to Liz's practice today. Liz was born in Sacramento. She is a Californian by birth. She studied at CalArts, the California Institute of the Arts, where she received her BFA in 1985. So Liz was at CalArts in a legendary moment of CalArts' history, which perhaps we'll talk about a little bit later. She currently has a beautiful survey exhibition of her work, from the very beginnings of her work to the most contemporary pieces at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis right now. That was co-organized with the Sculpture Center in New York, where it first appeared. It's in Minneapolis now. The exhibition is called Don't Put It Back Like It Was, and I hope Liz will tell us a little bit about that title. She is also concurrently has an exhibition up in Zurich at the Kunsthalle Zurich, which has a new work installation, an amazing installation, which we'll see, also with a smaller kind of survey of her work included. She is shown all over the world. She is shown here in Aspen at the Aspen Art Museum in 2016, at the Art Institute of Chicago in 2015, at Kunsthaus Graz in Austria in 2006, at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles in 2001, at the Mack Center for Applied Arts and Design in Vienna in 1998, and Kunsthalle Basel in 1997. That's just a small sampling of where Liz has shown over the years. Liz has also done a number of public commissions. Those of you who have a connection to Denver or go through Denver might have seen her work, Jewel, at the Byron Rogers Federal Building, which was commissioned by the GSA in 2015. Public Jewel, yeah. It's called. Yeah. You've also done public projects at the University of California in San Francisco, and in Riverside for the pedestrian bridge at Walt Disney Studios in Burbank.
In Burbank.
In Burbank.
On Riverside Drive.
On Riverside Drive, sorry. This is my handwriting that I'm reading, so.
It's okay.
Liz has also been awarded many awards, including the Mutina This Is Not a Prize Award, my favoritely named prize, actually, after the Magritte painting, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Nancy Grace Foundation grant, many other things. She is in innumerable museum collections, and I will name a few of them, but I actually could not write them all down. I had to look on the website, including the Art Institute of Chicago, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden in Washington, Museo Jumex in Mexico City, LACMA in Los Angeles, the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, so on and so forth, the Stedelijk in Amsterdam, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis and the Whitney Museum, but many, many others. So Liz has been exhibited widely, collected widely. She's represented by our friend and colleague Sean Regan at Regan Projects in Los Angeles. And Sean has come from LA to be with us here today. We're very grateful for you coming in to the ranch to be with us. Liz, we'd love to hear the story. And one of the first things I was always fascinated by when I first met you and was reading about your work many years ago when Sean introduced me to your work was that you're a sculptor, but you began your education in art in another medium, in photography. And I find it very interesting how you got from point A to point B. And I don't know if that's something we can start talking about with the first works, or if that's a good intro, or how we can move in. But you let us know.
That's a good intro. Thank you. Thank you so much, Douglas. It's great to be here, and thank you all for coming. So yes, I got my degree in photography in 1985, and but at the end of my time there, I had been working with James Casabir. Some of you may know his work. He's a photographer, and he uses models, and he makes these incredible models that he then lights and photographs. And so I was his assistant, and I was helping him make his models. And I just realized, as I was about to get my degree, that I didn't really want to be a photographer. I wanted to, instead of taking pictures of things, I wanted to make things. And so, and then I graduated. And then it became, okay, kind of like trying to teach myself how to do this. So this is a photograph of these first sculpture works that I made. The one on the left is the fresh culture of orchid buttermilk penny, and the one on the right is after, I think it's 3 months. So, and this is the sculpture that I made of that, that I showed at the Les Annuali. It's also in the show at the Walker, and so the idea is to show the very fresh culture with the one that has aged. So the way it works now is I always use whatever the last one was gets put on the right-hand side, and the new one gets made on the left-hand side.
So Liz, with these cultures, you basically are taking a petri dish with agar, which is a protein material, and you put 3 elements in and see what happens.
Yeah, usually 3.
3?
Yeah, when I started out, I used actual objects like a penny and buttermilk and an orchid, but then I realized, I worked with the media, as it's called, more, and realized that I could work with color and just add anything that I would touch with an inoculating wand. I'm sure there's some scientists out there that know what I mean, but it's a wand with a little metal loop on the end, and you can brush it over anything and swipe it over a nutrient agar culture, and that bacteria will grow. And then I realized that I could color the agar, and I use food coloring to do this. And so sometimes I would pour a red layer, yellow layer, and blue layer, and then whatever the culture was would dig down into that media and kind of produce this painting or these colored forms. But this piece is at the Kunsthalle Zurich right now, and it's from '88. And it was a group show with artists from America and Europe and Russia at the time, which was still the USSR. And so there were a lot of artists there that were in the show, and I had them. It was kind of a performative piece. So I had these cultures ready, and I had one that was in a beaker. And I just asked them to all come by and to breathe into the dishes and to the beaker. So this piece is called Every Artist Gave a Breath. And then, and so it was kind of slowly moving out. What I realized was I was very interested in materials. And the reason that I love sculpture, and I call myself a sculptor, is because I feel that sculpture is the art form where it is visual, but it's not purely visual. It's really, we use all of our senses to take in a sculpture, and it includes movement, because and a lot of times it's very hard. I always say, like, the best sculptures can't really be photographed because, you know, you have to take them in all around, and it includes time, and it's very personal, but at the same time, you know, there's this collective idea of what a material means, what it's called, and then what it means to the person themselves. So because I was starting out in sculpture, I looked to a lot of precedents, and I looked to Brancusi, and this piece is called Bird in Space, and it's kind of after his, I'm sure many of you know Brancusi's Bird in Space, which is he made it in many materials. He made it in bronze, polished bronze, and also in marble, but you can see it in the center, but this is more of a piece that isn't, it's not the aerodynamic form in the same way as he modeled it. It's taking that idea and expressing it in a different configuration with different materials, and it's nylon cord and silk thread and 2 stainless steel blocks which hold it. And it's adaptable. It can be in many different spaces. You can kind of see the bird in the center there. And so this is it at the Walker right now with another piece from around that same time that's called Out of Touch, which is 16 miles of surgical gauze, which really was also from Duchamp's work, where he expanded the string around the armory.
It's the first surrealist show in New York.
Right.
Yeah. He put string all the way through an exhibition that the viewers had to climb through to look at a Picabia painting or whatever else he put in the show.
So this is, and so it's kind of it's thinking of Duchamp. It's sort of like I was thinking about his piece Hidden Noise and that work when I made this. So this is this is 1990, working with other material and with a theme that I'm still very interested in, which is like other life forms rather than human, which, you know, we're all connected. And so this is called No M, No D, Only S and B, which, you know, stands for no mother, no father, only sister and brother. So it's kind of relating to like lower life forms that, you know, just either auto-reproduce or produce themselves, and there is no real mother or father. This piece is called Smile. Stop me if you have a question.
No, don't worry.
This piece is called Smile, and it's the first ceramic works that I did. I didn't study ceramics in school. In fact, when I went to CalArts, they had a huge gas kiln, and it was just used for storage. Nobody was making ceramics. Nobody was making it. It was completely shut down. So I wanted to work with ceramics, and I had this idea of making something out of a foam core model, but then casting it in porcelain and kind of translating the image of the material through the form, but then the feeling of the porcelain through the material of the cast porcelain. But I didn't know how to go about it. I'd made the forms, and then I found out that Ken Price was teaching at USC, and my landlady happened to be the secretary of the art school, so I asked her if I could audit the class there, and I got to audit 2 semesters with Ken, and I really learned so much about ceramics from him. He was an incredible teacher and such a great guy, and a wonderful artist, but he was not interested in slip casting at all. Then I worked with someone else who had just graduated from UCLA, who had learned slip casting there, and his name was Chris Grant, and he's gone on to become a fabricator, but we did this, and this is why I got my first kilns, because they were so big and they were porcelain that sometimes I couldn't even move them from the table that I was working on them on to the kiln. They would just break. So it was a real.
Can I ask you about the smiles? Because they seem like a very, there's a threshold in the work in your sort of career arc where this seems to go on. And I know our friend Connie Bullers talked about these in terms of the uncanny and the kind of going between the abstract form of modernist kind of breaking down of form to a smile, which is a biomorphic, anthropomorphic. And there is that play in your work all the way through that work between the body and the figure and our presence as bodies in space and an abstract form, and how modernism has dealt with that in a kind of a muscular way, and then in this way with the smiles, there's a kind of fragmentation necessarily to the work. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about like why you chose that idea of the smile.
Yeah, and also, the cultures have a lot to do with body too, and bacteria and these life forms that are in us and outside of us. But so the smile, I had been reading a couple of books. I read this book by, it's a story, but it's called The $1 Million Banknote by Mark Twain, and another book called The Red, the White, and the Blue. And I just realized that in writing, you always have to have a modifier in front of the word smile, or you don't know what it is, because it has to be described by an adjective or something. And I thought that was such a great kind of way to think about making a sculpture, like that, whatever the modifier is or the adjective is. And so...
What was Mark Twain's adjective that
Well, no, he has like a 2-page description
of
a smile. Yeah.
Okay.
John Gregory Dunn also had some really great adjectives for his smiles. But it was just this idea. It was like it's an idea in writing, but I wanted to translate it into sculpture. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to make these 2 forms, and I'm making them out of porcelain, and they're the same forms because they're cast. But the kiln is going to change them, because every time I make one, because there's no grit in porcelain, it's so susceptible to bending and heat, they're always changed by the method of making them solid. So that's the idea.
Yeah, great, I see.
Okay. Oh yeah. So here's another. This is a show that was at Tanya Benaktar. I think it was 2010, and it's mixed with. It's a lot of mixed media. The one on the floor is another smile, and it's like kind of floating on a bunch of fragments of a lot of the smiles that didn't make it. And then there's a sticker piece that went around the room. I don't have the whole photo, but it was. But this whole show is sort of based off of a film that I really admire by Michelangelo Antonioni called Red Desert. And so the colors in the show were taken from this hallucinatory, he would use this purple to explain this hallucinatory state, and then the heroine, by the way, or anti-heroine, and in the movie had a son, and he would always be wearing this little gold jacket. And so that's kind of like around the room. And then this is another X. I do a lot of X's, and it's called 6. And then the first sort of wall piece that I've been doing for many years now was that one. And then I was also doing these pieces, which I still do sometimes, that I called the Petal Pieces, which are, I think this is that piece that's on the wall. And so, I use this, I think it's mostly all oil paint on ceramic.
But this is ceramic.
This is ceramic.
Yeah, these are ceramics.
Yeah. And so was the smile. So should I go on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is the first wall piece, and it's called Transspicuous Broom. Oh, and that piece, I'll go back. That piece is called Blue and Green, which was the first title for Red Desert. So I thought that was really, I do think that Antonioni, I won't digress too much, but I really feel that film was it's such a beautiful film, and it really is a film that just talks about our interior state and our exterior state. And I also think it's one of the first environmental films.
Environmental films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is called Transspicuous Broom, and it's supposed to be, because there's a lot of fog in the Red Desert, which I love. And that Transspicuous Broom is just a fancy way of saying fog. But it's supposed to look like a book that was lying face down. That's what this form was kind of taken from. And that's a detail. And then this piece, later I made this piece, and this was when, it's called Octan, and it's another ceramic, and it was supposed to be a kiln shelf. But when I opened the kiln, it was broken, and I was very disappointed. And then I pulled it out and put it back together, and I thought, wow, I love these cracks. And so it was the first work that I had done where I sort of accepted like the failure of the process and not trying to make the process do what I want, but to allow the material and the process to teach me and help me make my work. And so there was a big gap here, and these are some of those porcelain pieces that were in that other work. So it really changed my work, kind of accepting this and beginning to do this.
And this has become a huge part of your sort of philosophical relationship to objects. And if you go back to the cultures where you also didn't have control over what they were going to look like, there's this sense of acceptance in the kind of breaks here. And you've also linked that in some things you've spoken about to language and gaps in poetry and these kind of moments of grace in between two words or something.
Yeah, caesura is a poetic term, which means a break in one thing. So it's not a diptych, it's just something that has a break in it or a rupture or a pause. This is the passage. So yeah, so I have these forms, and the ones that have a slight bump in them where there might be a caesura, but it doesn't happen, are called passages. And this is just some details of that. And then, so I'm jumping ahead to, I think there'll be some others in a moment, but this is aspen, as you probably all know. And you saw the other X sculpture 6 before in that shot from the Binocular Gallery, but this is an X that I made. It's a polished stainless steel X, and it was out for almost a year here. And it was at the same time as I had a show that Heidi Zuckerman curated, and she was very exact. She's like, I just want to do the wall pieces, and I just want to hang them all around the room at the same height. And I was like, sounds great. I'd love to do that. So I don't know so these are kind of the different forms. So the gray one, that's a caesura. So there's an actual break in that. And then the one to the right of that is called the califaction. So it has bits of, actually I was making this other work. It has bits of stone and mineral in it. And then there's 2 inflections right there on the other side.
And all the terms you use for naming these bodies of work within these ceramic works all come from geology?
Some come from poetry and geology.
Some from poetry. Okay.
Yeah. So a subduction is one, I don't know if we'll see any here, but a subduction, there's one on the right.
On the right.
Where the planes overlap each other.
It's in plate tectonics, where
Yes.
one plate, that's where you get earthquakes.
Right.
California.
Yeah.
Very good.
Living on the San Andreas Fault for many years. So this is that show. And then this is kind of an interesting room because the one to the right of the subduction on this far wall, that was, I think, the first or second one I think it's the first one I ever made. And it's very elegant, and it is very beautiful, but I worked it really hard. Like I made that shape. I was there, and then I cut off all the edges, and I sanded it, and I made it so perfect. And that's what I was doing when I was first making these. And then as time went on, I really felt that the beauty of the clay and showing the clay in its kind of less work state was more beautiful than that. Maybe elegant in a different way, but much rougher, So this is a califaction, and so I think it's coming up here. I can go back if you'd like me to. This is a passage. These wrens are mostly, because this has so much glaze on it, this is mostly in the glaze. But this is a caesura, and this one has oil paint and glaze. And this is a funny one because it really doesn't photograph right at all.
It looks completely flat.
This is such a distorted image. It's interesting, but you can see in a minute. it. So you can see how it sticks out from the other plane. So, yeah.
And Liz, how do you decide whether you're going to use a glaze or whether you use epoxy in some of them or whether you use oil paint or a combination?
Well, I started off with epoxy, pigmented epoxy, because glaze was something that I didn't know as much about as working with other materials. And so, what I was really interested in was working with color. I find color really fascinating. And a lot with these works, the way that I choose to do them is I get them out of the kiln and then I hang them on the wall and look at them for a while and sort of, they kind of tell me like who they want to be, or maybe that's too anthropomorphizing, but they kind of, in looking at them, I get a sense of like a character almost in a way, and like what can come out of that, and that's how I choose the color.
I see. Okay.
This is a flexion, I think. And then lately, I've started using glass as well. So this is glazed with glass. And as you can see, the top part broke off, and I thought that it was way more wonderful than any form I could have made. And this is also one with glass. And this is one with glass.
A lot of glass.
I'm getting into the glass.
A lot of glass.
Yeah, and I find that, so this is kind of another, it's in the detail, you can see it. So you can see the little rectangles where I've inserted the piece of glass. And so each piece of glass is like a different size slightly. But I can never, I will not know before firing it how big or what the shape of those melted blobs will be. But I love this because you see the initial cut that the glass made into the clay when I inserted those lines. But then, then it's kind of up to the material and the heat, to sort of make that. So you can see it. It's a really rather rigorously cut in the beginning, and then the kind of blobs just sort of soften that.
The words controlled chaos have been used to describe this practice of yours, and open-ended as well. I think that you just don't know what it's going to take. But I think every ceramicist has
That's
this
part
issue
of
with
ceramic.
part of the alchemy of ceramics.
I've just embraced that. That's
Yes.
one of the other things I love about ceramics is that, that is, for a long time, has been part of that practice.
Yeah.
And so this is also a kind of a newer kind of thing that I'm doing. When I was doing epoxy, it took 7 hours for it to cure, and that had slopes, and there's like a topography to each surface, and so that was sort of shown through the slow movement of the epoxy. But with glaze, I'm making these forms, and I'm actually I'm making them on top of these plastic, refuse plastic forms, and they have undulations in them. And so all of these marks and flows are made by gravity also pulling the melting glaze like through these different forms. So it's something that it's really specific to what kind of glaze I use, if it's running a lot or not, and then what the form is. So it's like I kind of know, but I don't really know exactly what's going to happen. But I'm the more I work with things, kind of, the better judge I get of what might happen. But I never have full control. So this is the piece that's in Denver, and I was working on this piece in a different studio at my studios, and we were cutting all of these stones and minerals, and I had all these cutoffs. And so one time it was just like, I wonder what would happen if I put these in the clay. And so that's how I came upon making the calefactions. And calefaction just means formed by heat. So this is, and it's on the Federal Plaza in Denver, where the federal courthouse and federal building are.
Do the elements affect the sculpture over time, or how do you maintain
Well,
or
yeah.
not maintained?
And so this was I had another thing that I was going to do, but it turned out to be impossible. So I worked with a geologist from the Colorado School of Mines to identify, because I wanted to use all Colorado minerals and stones. And we made a list of what was found in Colorado that could withstand the extreme heat and cold temperatures of Denver, because on one day it could be like 80 degrees and then snow in the afternoon or something. So I had this list, and then I made 4 trips to the state, and I bought a big truck, and it was a really kind of an adventure to drive all around the state and meet all different kinds of people, from rockhounds to prospectors to geologists, and gather up all these stones. And then I brought them back to LA, and we made the fixtures in my studio to build this. And so following from that, one of the ways I got introduced to that geologist was I went to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, which happens every year in Tucson. It's the largest gem and mineral show in the United States. And I just tried to meet as many people from Colorado and find out who I could work with. But at that time, they always have a show there. It's like an incredible, it's like lasts 6 weeks, and it's all over the city. But there was a show about Arizona gems and minerals, but what they had was all the different people from all the different countries and states that had the same minerals as Arizona had these shows. And so there was a very beautiful hematite crystal, and it looked like a reclining figure. And so from seeing that, I wanted to make this piece, which was called Firestone, and it's kind of a combination of a reclining figure and a hematite crystal. So again, kind of going back not just to bacteria, but also to minerals and what makes up our world and our bodies. This piece is called Reef. This is at Regan Projects, and it's formed. It's also ceramic with minerals and glaze. Quite large. It's now in the collection at Chicago Art Institute, Chicago. This is an image from the show at the Walker. This is Planchette and Hands, which was the first slide you saw. It was actually from '93 that I made these, and it was kind of a funny thing because it really threw people off when I made Hands, because they thought I was a post-minimalist, and what was I doing?
Why is the hand of the figure coming back?
Yeah, why is the figure coming back? It's like, well, because that's what I'm trying to talk about, how all these things are related. But it didn't really work. But it's gratifying to now be in a position where I feel confident showing these things together. And I do feel that like the planchette, the standing planchette is figurative without, kind of like Firestone is figurative. And it reminds us of the body and its movement and its forms, but without necessarily being a body.
Well, there's such a break and there's such a conceptual within the discourse of art history between figuration and abstraction, when indeed, if you even look at that history, so much of it is about the overlap, the breaking down of visual representation of the figure into these kind of optical forms and whatnot. So for me, when I see these together from the Walker galleries, it seems like a perfect circle in a way.
Thank you. Well, but the real break then, from what you're saying, is it's so interesting. It's really a break between abstraction and figure, more realistic figuration.
Yeah.
That's the real break. And so, but I don't see it that. I mean, I can see it that way, but I don't want to make my work like be that way. I wanted to bring them together.
Yeah.
So this is from the Sculpture Center. The show opened in January and then went to the Walker. It was very different in the 2 different spaces. There's the Corner Basher, which was made around the same time as Burns Face,
Which is the piece on the upper left.
Yeah.
With the machine. It's kinetic work that you control as the viewer, correct?
Yes.
And you can turn up the speed of it, and I don't know. It was an amazing experience to be at the Sculpture Center and at the beginning of the show and it was silent when we arrived, and then someone turned it on, and it really was disruptive in a very interesting way.
Yes.
You can maybe talk about, and the corner, because this also figures into architecture. It's hard to, I'd like to get you to talk a little bit about how you use space, because you're making discrete sculptures, but you've always been interested in kind of the dynamics of architectural space, and then even the idea of the poetics of a corner, for example, which is kind of a forgotten bit of architecture.
Yeah, I've made a lot of corner pieces. I don't think I have too many in this slide presentation, but Corner Basher, I think it's 1988 or 87. I can't remember. What does it say? It doesn't say.
I can't read it on my glasses.
I can't. I'm
No,
always,
this just says installation
Yeah,
view 2022.
right.
so-
I think it was around the same time as Bird and Space and no M, no D, only S and D. And so the
88.
idea was to make a kinetic sculpture that was audience controlled. And this had something to do with these guys in San Francisco who were making
Research magazine.
Research Magazine and
What was the lab called?
Survival Research Labs, yeah, and
You
Mark
have to tell
Pauline.
people who they are.
Mark
because-
Pauline, yeah.
Yeah,
and
Mark Pauline. They
and-
were punk rock
They were-
meets avant-garde meets.
Yeah, and I actually think they're like the granddaddies of Burning Man in a way. You know,
They
but-
published a magazine where
Yeah.
they would do a whole issue about William Burroughs,
Yeah.
and one about J.G. Ballard,
Right.
and then body art people and
Yeah.
tattoos and things.
Yeah, and they, Mark Pauline, they came to LA and they did this show, and it was all these guys with these controllers, like operating all these machines that were bashing each other. And I thought, oh, I'd love to do that, but I'd love to make it audience controlled and not have like a controller like making the performance for you. And so I was interested in the corner, and it doesn't, it's every wall, every audience makes a different mark. It's kind of, some people are like, oh, well, that's not what it's about. But for me, it's like, it is a subtractive sculpture that this tool makes, and the operators of the tool are this group who maybe don't even know each other or aren't really working together, but are making this thing, which I think is one of the most interesting things about it. But it is very loud and disturbing as well.
But also there's this rhythm to it,
Yeah.
because you can turn it up, the frequency up or down, so it can go bump, bonk, or bump, 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 bonk.
It has a speed control on-off switch.
And then there's a long history of artists using the corner. So were you playing against like Nauman bouncing in the corner in his video in
Yeah,
the 60s, or?
It's like, for me, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to join in on this conversation. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to be part of this. It's just like I was saying with ceramics, like I'm embracing the what happens.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the corner, and I want my work to be part of that conversation and join that conversation that's been going on for quite a while. And then this is just a hall where there was a scissor down at the end. Sculpture Center. Oh, wait, whoops.
There we go.
Okay, so this is a piece, very figurative piece, that was in the same show when I showed Firestone at Regan Projects, and it's called "You Might Have to Live Like a Refugee." And so she is. Let's see. It was in this show, and you'll see her again as we go further. This is a wall ceramic. I call these subductions. It's got kind of an indent in the center. This one's called Mart.
That's the basement of the Sculpture Center in New York. This installation that Liz did there is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen there. It was like
Thank you.
made for it. It felt like.
So this is also the Sculpture Center again, and this is Planchette and Bird and Space together. And this is now the Walker installation, and those are two culture works, a wall work and a chain work, which I don't think I showed any of those, but I did a number of chain and tension works. And this is one of the galleries, and this has this piece called 2 is 3 and some 2, which I think this piece in a way describes a lot of what my work is about formally, which is it's basically 2 cubes. But because of the color on the piece, like it's very hard for them to it looks like it's moving as you're moving. And I think movement around sculpture is such a wonderful thing. Like sometimes I compare sculpture and dance is very closely related, but in dance we watch movement and form and the body moving, and with sculpture, the sculpture and the person encountering the sculpture work together to like make a movement.
It's a duet in a way.
Yeah.
You were moving and it's moving.
Yeah, and you know, it's like the kind of, you know, everybody might do it different. Now, I've watched people looking at sculpture, and it's such a beautiful thing to watch because everybody's interested in another aspect.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that part of sculpture. Sorry, I should be looking at the audience. It's hard. So, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I
We
don't.
have a few more minutes. We should talk about this work.
Okay, so this is very recent work that I've been doing, and I actually started collecting this material about 4 years ago when I realized that China wasn't taking our recycling anymore. And I just started taking this stuff from my blue bin and taking it to my studio. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And I was shocked at how rapidly it like built up to be so much material.
Just from your house to the studio?
Just from our family of 3. Yeah. So this is just a kind of close-up of them. It's these pieces are called, well, we'll get to it. So let me go back. These pieces are called Mirsham Drips, and I did make them originally for the Kunsthalle Zurich show because Daniel Baumann, the curator there, wanted to do a small survey upstairs, and he insisted that only new work could be downstairs. And so I conceived of this kind of, it's sort of like a landscape, a skyscape, a seascape, and using plastic to make what I call the Mirsham Drifts, which is in German means sea foam. And so this one, but because of COVID, that show was postponed for 2 years. So I showed this piece at Regan Projects with some other asteroids. So this is just kind of a close-up of it. So, and I'm gonna kind of, these are the asteroids that, so it's the Mirsham Drifts with ceramic asteroids. And for me, the combination of these two materials, like this is one of the things I love about sculpture, which I mentioned before. You really feel it. Like you feel the material. Like you don't have to. It's maybe with your eyes. I don't know I don't really know what it is, but we feel it. Like you know what a material is when you encounter it. And those two materials together create meaning that I'm not going to interpret for everyone, but I feel like they really show the difference between each other, even though they both come from underground in the earth. So yeah, this one's
because plastic comes from petroleum,
right,
and then the ceramic is clay as earth as well.
Right. And this, so they're all called asteroid, and then with a name because all asteroids are named, and it's quite interesting how asteroids first got their names. It was a Franciscan brother, I think it was 1801. That discovered the first one in Italy, and he named it Ceres, which is Demeter in Greek mythology. And then after that, all the asteroids were named after female goddesses until they ran out of female goddess names, and then they started naming the asteroids gods, and then it started being, the family members of the astronomer that discovered it, and now it's more like numbers because there's, so many. So these are clay, and like this one was before I was even really looking at real asteroids. I was like, what does an asteroid look like? And just trying to make that, and then use the glaze to, bring it out. And but then I realized, I should look at the NASA site because all these asteroids are actually, there's images of them now. And so then I started making, it's almost like portraits of asteroids. And, they're very blurry images, so it's quite easy to, not have to be exact. But this is Psyche, and these are all glazed ceramics. And this is also Psyche. And so they have different. And this is the show. This is the installation at the Kunsthalle Zurich. And so the idea kind of was like coloristically that, if it's the ocean, the sea foam's sort of coming in from the windows, but as a viewer, it's like you're standing on the boardwalk or something, and you see the first things, the kind of toys and the umbrellas, and then you see the sand, and then you see the ocean behind, and then the asteroids are mixed within. So it's definitely a fantasy landscape. It could never truly occur. But this first one has a lot of very recognizable sort of emotional things like toys. And then this is the upstairs, the Kinsella Zurich. This is the X again. And then a really old piece that I think I showed at Regan Projects in 1990. The show opened on the day of the first Gulf War. It was kind of crazy. But it was about color and material, and it's called Orange Blue, and there was purple, yellow, and red and green corridors. And then the hands are there. So he's like, I'm gonna put everything together. And the ceramics are there, and then you might have to live like a refugee is there.
Just to end, would you mind speaking a little bit about the refugee? Just how did she come about?
Well, I
had
made her in clay at first, and with an armature though, and then I had a mold made of it, and then I cast that into wax, and then I finished it in the wax, and then I wanted to cast it in bronze, and then we did the patina. It's a patina, but we also added some phosphorescence, so she does glow in the dark.
She does glow in the dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was at this time when I was finishing it, I guess, at this time when there were a lot of refugees being separated at the border, and there were a lot of refugees from Syria trying to get out of lots of different countries, and I thought, it's like things are changing so much, you just never know, I'm sure a lot of those people never expected that to happen to them. And so it's thinking about that idea.
And the body morphing into the wall, and this.
She's escaping.
Yes.
She's trying to escape.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gallery. No.
The white cube. Liz, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's
see.
No, I don't want to. Sorry.
I just wanted to say.
Yeah,
so this is in the show too. So this is because this was still and the hands, and you saw those other two. So this is a close up of the hands, and that's all the slides.
I want to ask if anybody has a question from the audience, and we have a microphone. So over here.
Could you talk about the Mirsham drift a little bit? Like, I couldn't tell if you'd added paint or if the color came from the plastics, and if they're melted to go together. I couldn't quite get what you were doing.
They come apart in 4-foot sections because they're very large. And I had to do a lot of work, and I've done a lot of research on plastics in the last few years, but I made a book actually that had listed all the different kinds of plastics and what you could do for the studio for me, so I knew what I could do, because all those numbers that are on the plastics is different kind. Like 7 means unrecyclable totally, and 1 means one thing, and it's different plastics, so you could do different things to different plastics. Some of them you can heat, not many of them you can actually melt. I didn't really melt any of them. One piece in there was like a plastic dish that we had in the oven and forgot was in there. I think someone just stashed it in there. I opened the oven, I was like, it was half melted, so it was terrible. But these things happen with these materials. It's like we're not always that aware of dangerous materials that are in the home. But so mostly though, I made this book so we knew what we could do. And some things are cut, and some things are not melted, but warmed and manipulated, and then I used plastic paint, acrylic paint on them. And it's all put together by zip ties.
Another question, Barry? Here, there's a microphone coming. There you
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And I was particularly interested in your evolution and progression of your practice over time and working with materials. So my question is this: with your intimate involvement with different materials, intuitively, emotionally, and so forth, can you express yourself, what you feel these personalities of the materials are to you? When you talk about ceramics, you're talking about glass, you're talking about stone, minerals, now all these different things through the ages. Do they bring a personality that you can connect with in certain ways?
Yeah, and their personalities are very just like people. It's not exact, and it changes. So the more I work with it, the more, it's at first it was just like, I just want to use porcelain because porcelain is, we're so familiar with it. It's fine china, it's in our teeth. Like, that's perfect for the smiles. It's white. That was my first idea. And then the more I got to know it, it's just like a person. There's so many little things that and that was what happened like in the kiln when I realized like the kiln was just taking these forms that I had made so carefully and put into the kiln so carefully and like slightly changing them. And that was the interaction of heat with porcelain. And so it's like you get to know it. So if I could say like, it's hard for me to like name like one thing, it's like it develops and I feel like every material I have an initial attraction to, and then it's like the process of getting to work with it where like it, it's like getting to know a person. You're first like, oh, that I'd like to talk to that person. And then, you're like, oh, you find out so much more over time. So I couldn't really like, I guess the thing with clay is that it's so changeable and flexible. It has, and yet it can be made hard. It's like it can form a rigid idea, but it comes from this incredible flexibility. So I guess that's one thing I think about clay. Minerals are, working and just going to all those places around Colorado and seeing all the different minerals, like even one mineral can look so many different ways. It's like they might have some of the same characteristics, but not in the same way and never in the same arrangement. So there's this, it's like, it's like humans. We all look so different, but we're all humans. And I just, and I love color, so that, and all the textures are different. Like the mica, there's some pieces in there that have mica that just peels off. And so it's like the variety is like endless. So they all have a personality, and I don't know. And paper, I love paper too. Like paper is so, I've made some paper, and it's like, paper is like, we just think of it, it's just paper, but all the surfaces, and I don't know. That's not a good answer. I'm sorry. What about you? Do you have an idea about that?
Your face lights up when you talk about it.
There's a question back there.
I find the diversity of your work so compelling. I'm back here trying to find your website, and it looks like most of your online presence is third party, or the shows you've had, or the interviews. Is that an option you've made? No, I don't want to play that game anymore.
I've never been on social media.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, I'm scared of what, the time loss. I don't know, you have to make choices, it took me a long time. When I was 40, I had this realization, like, you can't do everything in life. And so when social media came along, I just knew I could either do a lot of that or have more time to work. Thank you.
Is there one more question from anybody? Yes, here. Well, if you can wait for the microphone, sorry. There you go.
It seems to me historically with porcelain, things were so controlled, and the desire for control and a certain look, or even specific flowers, 1700 French porcelain, you embrace spontaneity. So you would never keep your glazes secret. Is that true? It used to be a secret society almost.
Well, that makes sense because, just in the work that I've done, like, I have so much respect for the craft of those people, and they were very precise people. I mean, you know, to do that, and so I think along with that comes a kind of guarding of what you've developed, and you know, there are ceramicists that have recipes for glazes that give them out and that don't. You know, I mostly work more like a painter with glazes, and I do make some from recipes, but I don't make my own recipes. That's more, that's something I'd like to try to get into over time, but it's not, you know, it takes I want to get going, and also, you know, what's available out there is amazing, and what I mostly do is I use combinations of glazes. So I don't really have like a recipe or something like that that's just a Liz Larner glaze, you know what I mean? So, but I think that I know that some people are horrified by the smiles and what I did, because they really, you know, it's that way of making and using that material with that precision that is, you know, so revered. And I have a lot of respect for that, you know. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I mean, I think, you know, I don't think that telling your secrets as an artist, I don't think anybody can make something exactly the same as someone else, honestly. Maybe one time you can copy something. There's definitely great forgers out there. But, you know, that's a whole practice too, you know? That's like, I'm a forger. You know, I actually know somebody that did that for a while. When I was in Vienna, I met someone like that. But, and he was great at it. But, you know, I really think to be an artist, it's like, you know, you have to do it all the time, and eventually something comes out of you that is you. And that's, you know, that's kind of what art is, and that's what artists do, I think.
Liz, I want to thank you for joining us. And
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thanks, Douglas. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Please join us next week. Jeff Law will be here. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah.